Nomad Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It is time to continue my discussion on the history of Magic the Gathering, where I go set by set, release by release, giving you some information about it to understand some more lore, some more cards, everything you need to know about that products that Wizards of the Coast has released over the years. So today for you, I have 10th edition, the 10th core set released by Magic. So this was released on July 13th of 2007, only 10 years ago, and it had 283 cards to it. Now the big keywords here were Flash, Lifelink, Reach, and Shroud. Now it's important to note this is the first core set since Limited to be black bordered. This is also the first core set since 5th edition to have over 350 cards. Another big first here, it's the first core set to have legendary cards. There were 2 legends of each color and 1 legendary artifact. Some of the cards that were within the set, some of the artists, the basic lands, some of the flavor text, and even the expansion symbol itself, the Roman numeral X. These were all voted upon on Magic the Gathering's website to determine what was going to be in it. They had votes over a period of time for all this, for basically to help with the design of it. So it was sold in 16 card booster packs, noting that one of these cards here was a marketing card I'll talk about in a minute, 5 pre-constructed decks, a fat pack, and a 10th edition starter game. It is important to note that there were no tournament packs here. All products, except for the booster packs, had a random Pro Tour card. This is an interesting one. So we've had premium cards up till now. The premium cards that were released as part of 10th edition, the randomly inserted ones, the random replacement ones, we've reached the more modern version of. Did we have these random premium cards? They did things like they did not have the reminder text that other cards would have. Some of them would have extra flavor text. And a good example would be Time Stop. It centered the text at the bottom. So you can see how the premium cards were different in a way than the normal cards. They weren't just foil special versions of these cards. They were slightly different too. Slightly better. Now an important note here is in order to commemorate this event, the event of release of this, on July 14th, 2017 was the first Magic the Gathering Game Day. A big event which they do happen still today. A release card of Ray of Dawnbringer was, though, well, released with this set. So as I said, each pack had a marketing pack. This marketing pack was either a token or a tip or a trick, basically a rules card. Now it is important to note that the other side of this token, or the tip or trick card, was, well, an ad for Magic. So you had an ad on one side and a token, or you'd have an ad on one side and a tip and a trick. It is also important to note here that the starter release set had lands from Lorwyn in it. And Lorwyn wasn't released up until now. Basically, Lorwyn was coming out soon after now, and we had some lands from it you could get. Now, the tips and tricks, there were 12 tips and tricks you could see, including a number of combos that were within the deck that were being advertised for you to be able to use. And then it also had 6 tokens you could get. This included a 5/5 flying red dragon creature token. Now, this is the first set to have sample decks. Now, what do I mean by sample decks is first off, they advertised online 10 30-card sample decks that you could know what's in them. These were commons and uncommons you could put together to create a sample deck. Now, this is just examples of decks, 2 of each color, which you could probably put together to make a 60-card big deck of each of these colors. And again, these are just commons and uncommons. The thing is, you could get these in a physical form. These were given away promotionally, either through the website in which they were shown these examples, or directly through special events. You could go to Wizards there. You could get examples of these. You could get actually these in sample form. Now the keywords of Defender, the creature can attack, and Double Strike, this creature does first strike and normal damage, made their way into core sets for the first time here. Granted, Defender had been in core sets, but as a word it had not been. We've had things that were like walls in core sets up until now, but now we had both these keywords coming into here. The keywords of Flash, I can play this card as an instant. Lifelink, this permanent, when it deals damage, I gain that much life. Reach, this can block creatures with flying. And Shroud, permanent or player with Shroud, cannot be the target of spells or abilities. These four, which had been introduced within the Time Spiral block, found their way into more common vernacular here. They were reprinted from the Time Spiral block and made into a regular ability, some of which had existed before but not in keyword format, but effectively this was their introduction to core sets and sets beyond here. Now this set had 7 cycles and 1 incomplete cycles. The cycles were the Lucky Charms, the artifacts from the Mirrodin block that cost you 2 to play, and whenever a spell of a certain color is cast, you gain a life. There was the Enemy Hosers, uncommons that would do negative stuff to both of its enemy colors. The Manlands, lands that for mana cost could become creatures until end of turn. The Muses, rare spirits with powerful abilities. And then there was the Painlands, 2 cycles of them. There was the allied color Painlands. You could tap them for colorless, or you could tap them for one of either a set of allied colors, and you take a damage if you tapped them for those. So you could tap for one color or the allied color of it, take a damage. But similarly, there was the enemy colored Painlands. Tap for a colorless, or tap for one color, tap for its enemy color. If you tap for any of the actual manas, you take a damage. There were the Weavers, 2 ones that would grant boosts to allied colored creatures. Now the incomplete set is the Spell Shapers from Future Sight. They did not reprint the white Spell Shaper. Now there was also almost another cycle here, the Beacons, back from the Mirrodin block. The thing is, they didn't print 2 of the Beacons here. They didn't print the blue one because they already had a card that effectively did the same effect, and they didn't print the green one because a number of cards would have played off of it incredibly well and proven to be very powerful. So they chose to ignore those and keep the other Beacons in. So Walls returned here. Up until now, we had seen a dropping of Walls, and now we have a return of Walls since a couple of sets ago. We also saw some rarity changes. As with most core sets, usually there is some kind of change around. There was 20 rarity changes, including Rule of Law, now being uncommon. From the previous core set, 214 cards were added, and 190 cards were removed. Those added included the Hive, making a return back from being away for quite a while. This being the card from the Unlimited blocks. Now, there were only 16 cards in this set that had been printed in every core set. A number of cards that had been printed up until now in 9th edition weren't reprinted here. We're down to just 16 that have been in every core set. 10 releases. Giant Spider being one of them. Now, the theme decks were a white deck called Cho-manno's Resolve, a blue deck called Arcanus' Guile, a black deck called Evankar's Tyranny, a red deck called Kamal's Temper, and a green deck called Malimo's Might. Now let's talk about some of the cards from the set. We had Abundance. If you may draw a card, when you may draw a card, instead you may choose either land or non-land. You then reveal the top cards of your library until you reveal a land card or a non-land card. Place that card into your hand, and then put the remaining cards that you had revealed on the bottom of your library in any order. So you can effectively choose to never get lands anymore, or to continue to get lands. Ambassador Liquatus. For 3, target player puts the top 3 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. You can mill 3 for 3. Ancestor's Chosen, a first strike that when it comes into play, you gain 1 life for each card in your graveyard. Angelic Chorus. When a creature comes into the battlefield under your control, you gain life equal to its toughness. Arcanus the Omnipotent. Tap to draw 3 cards. Or, for 2 colorless, 2 blue, return Arcanus to your hand. So if someone tries to kill him, you get him back. Ascendant Evancar, a 3/3 flyer. Other black creatures get +1/+1. Non-black creatures get -1/-1. Ballista Squad, X and tap. Deal X damage to target attacking or blocking creature. You blew up an attacking or blocking creature. Beacon of Immortality. Target player doubles their life total. Shuffle Beacon of Immortality into its owner's library. You double someone's life total. Beacon of Unrest. Choose target artifact or creature from a graveyard. Any graveyard. Put it into play under your control. Shuffle Beacon of Unrest into your library. These are my favorite of the two beacons which were reprinted. Cho-manno Revolutionary. Prevent all damage that would be dealt to cho-manno. Sentinel Flute. X tap. Search your library for a creature with the converted mana cost of X or less. Reveal it and put it into your hand. You fish creatures out of your library. Coat of Arms. Each creature gets +1/+1 for each other creature in play that it shares at least one type with. So if you're playing a tribal deck or a deck that does just happen to have a lot of creatures that share a lot of types, they get big. Crucible of Worlds. You may play land cards from your graveyard. If you're playing a deck that sacrifices lands for whatever reason, guess what? You can get them back. Diabolic Tutor. Search your library for a card, put it in your hand, shuffle your library. Simple as that. It is the standard black tutor as of now. Doubling Cube. 3 tap. Double the amount of mana of each appropriate color and type in your mana pool. Effectively, you 3 mana, tap it. Whatever mana is in your mana pool, double it. Dragon Roost. For 5 and 2 red. Put a 5/5 flying red dragon token creature into the battlefield. That's where those red dragon tokens I was talking about come into play. With this. Elvish Piper. For a green mana and tap it, put a creature card from your hand into the battlefield. You just throw something out from your hand into the battlefield. Furnace of Wrath. When a source would deal damage to a creature or player, deal double that amount of damage. You double the amount of damage is being dealt. Gaia's Herald. Creatures cannot be countered. Once you've played it, you shut down counter decks. Glorious Anthem. Creatures you control get +1/+1. Your stuff just gets bigger. Grave Pact. If a creature you control be put into the graveyard from play, each opponent sacrifices a creature. One of my favorites in a more sacrificial themed deck, or just a black deck in general, because once you lose creatures, so do your opponents. High Ground. Each creature you can control can block an additional creature. You make it that your creatures can block, well, 2 creatures. Holy Day. Prevent all combat damage that be dealt this turn. It's White Fog. You know, we've talked about Fog in the past. This is the white version of it. Joiner Adept. All lands you control have tap. Add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. You make it that your lands can tap for any color. Kamal Pitfighter. A 6/1 haste that can tap to deal 3 damage to target creature or player. He's a big, mean guy on his own, and he can blow up stuff. Legacy Weapon. For 5 mana, 1 of each color mana, exile target permanent. And should Legacy Weapon put into your graveyard from anywhere, shuffle it into its owner's library. So, whenever it's put into a graveyard, from any place, goes back in the library. And if you have a rainbow of colors, you can exile something. Luxodon Warhammer, an equipment that equips for 3. The equipped creature gets +3/+0, trample, and lifelink. Pretty good one. Lore, a classic I like to mention again because all creatures must block the enchanted creature if they are able to do so. Makes it that everything has to block 1 creature. March of the Machines. Every non-creature artifact you control is now an artifact creature with a power and toughness equal to its casting cost. So I make all of my artifacts creatures. Magrim. When an opponent would discard a card, Magrim deals 2 damage to them. If you're playing a discard deck, guess what? You're going to be doing damage to your opponents and killing them off. Millstone. Where it began the mill effect. This is where it's named after. For 2 mana, target player puts the top 2 cards of their library into their graveyard. Simple as that. It is just the source of it. You would have to tap it, may I note. Unlike the Ambassador, who we talked about earlier, who you just paying it, the Millstone, you tap it after you play this cost. But still, origin of mill. Miri Cat Warrior. A 2/3 first strike Farquaad, Vigilance. Nomad Mythmaker. For white and tap it. Put an aura card from your graveyard into the battlefield attached to a creature you control. So this way, with the Nomad Mythmaker, you can bring auras back from your graveyard to play attached to things. Plague Wind. Destroy all creatures you do not control. They cannot be regenerated. It wipes out everyone else's board. Platinum Angel. A 4/4 flyer that, as long as it's out in play, you cannot lose the game and your opponents cannot win the game. Primal Rage. All creatures you control have trample. Ray Dawnbringer, a 4/6 flyer that at the beginning of your upkeep, you may return a creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. She brings things back from the dead. Rocks, a 5/5 that for 2 colors and a green, it regenerates, and you may have it deal combat damage to opponent as if it was not blocked, should it be blocked. It has strike through. It gets blocked, it can still do damage to your opponent. Seedborn Muse. Untap all permanents you control during each player's untap step. That means every turn I get to untap. Every single one. I get everything of mine untapped. Sengir Vampire, a 4/4 flyer that when a creature that was dealt damage by Sengir Vampire goes in the graveyard from play this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on it. So if Sengir Vampire battles something and kills it, and Sengir Vampire lives, then it gets bigger. Sarah Angel, the 4/4 flying Vigilance, the counter to Sengir Vampire, both from the original sets. Siege Gang Commander, a 2/2 that when it comes into the battlefield, you put 3 1/1 red goblin creature tokens in the battlefield, and for 1 colorless and 1 red, you can sacrifice the goblins to do 2 damage to target creature or player. You get goblin tokens, and you can blow up goblins to kill people. Soul Warden, when a creature comes into the battlefield, you gain 1 life. Simple as that. Granted, it's other creatures, so you don't get it for Soul Warden. Spellbook. It costs you 0 to play. 0 cost artifact. You have no maximum hand size. Simple as that. Telepathy. Your opponents play with their hands revealed, so you can have it that everybody else shows their hands. Time Stop. You end this turn. You exile all spells on the stacks, all effects on the stacks. Time Stop gets exiled. Players discard their hands. Damage wears off. End of turn effects. End. It just ends a turn. Right then and there. Time Stretch. Target player takes 2 extra turns. This is why the Blue Beacon wasn't in this one, because we had Time Stretch here. Traumatize. Target player puts the top half of their library into their graveyard, rounded down. Effectively, you split up your library in half, rounded down, and the top half, oof, graveyard, gone. True Believer. You have Shroud. You control True Believer, you have Shroud. Twincast. Copy target instant or sorcery. You may choose new targets for that instant or sorcery you just copied. There was Upwelling. Mana pools don't empty at the end of phases and turns. Effectively, your mana pool just doesn't empty. Verdant Force. A 7/7 that at the beginning of each upkeep. That means every player's upkeep, every instance of an upkeep, you put a 1/1 green sapling creature token into the battlefield. That means every time, even other players, even your own, you get a sapling. Voice of All. When it comes, it's a 2/2 flyer. When it comes in the battlefield, you choose a color. Voice of All gets protection of the chosen color. So no matter what color you need protection from, you call it out, throw out Voice of All, it has it. Whisper Silk Cloak. For 2, it's equipped. Equipped creature gets Shroud, can't be the target of spells or abilities, and cannot be blocked. You make a creature unblockable and untargetable. Wrath of God. Destroy all creatures. They cannot be regenerated. A good counter to the Whisper Silk Cloak. Windborn Muse. Creatures can't attack you unless its controller pays 2 colorless mana for each creature they would attack with. So if an opponent wants to attack you with 5 creatures, they'll need to pay 10 colorless mana. 2 for each creature that's going to be attacking you. But that's it for today. So I introduce you to 10th edition. 10th edition. The final numbered edition. Beyond here, the core sets will change their titles. They'll change the way they do things. But we can see that 10th edition is very interesting. We were introduced to black bordered core sets. This was the first black bordered core set since Unlimited. And from now on, all core sets are black bordered. White bordered disappears. We can also see that legends are now a part of core sets. You can have legends in core sets. And this is the point in time they were introduced here. They were brought in. We can also see that the keywords that were introduced in Time Stop, in the Time Spiral block, that were actually popular and used before, that these were keywords that we had in existence up till now, made their way into here. This core set evolved core sets in a way. It is a bridge between the core sets of past, 9th edition, and the core sets of future. Though it still has artifacts of the past, it is an incredibly large core set. 383 cards is a lot of cards. It was just a bloated set filled with so many things. But as I've talked about, so many great cards too. Many of the cards were very good to have. And so you could get editions of these that were helpful. Now, of course, we still had some cards that have been printed in every set up until now. When we move into the future, it's hard to say how many of these will continue because we are dwindling these printed in Avery set cards. It's shrinking. Almost gone. And this is beyond, of course, the basic lands, but you're going to expect the basic lands. There were a number of other changes that we saw that were put here that it's hard to say how much of it really stuck. The way that they did premium cards. The advertisement cards. These will stay around for a while, but if you look at modern day, they don't have them quite the same anymore. Not like they did now, where one side's an ad and the other side's a token or tip and trick. They don't have tip and tricks anymore. They're just little things that existed that they were introduced here that stuck around for a while. Granted, some still exist here. Some artifacts of this time period. But it's a transition from the core sets of past, which were still, some of which were still called modern, but I would not call them true moderns. The white bordered core sets, 8th and 9th edition, that were within modern, they were modern appearance, but they weren't true modern sets until now. This is the evolution of the core set that was required. It was the stepping stone that led us into the true future core sets that we've had since then. But if you have any questions, comments, anything you want to say, anything you think I left out, please leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe at Search for the channel, the Empire, the work I do. If you want to show some extra support, you can always check out my Patreon. Link in the description below. There's some great rewards there. Helps to grow and improve the channel and the Empire. But regardless, until the next time, I bid you farewell.